One afternoon, as we were relaxing on the couch, my dad turned to me with a serious look. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. My heart started racing. This wasn't just casual conversation. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, trying to steady my nerves. He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I just want to make sure we're on the same page," he began. "This situation, it's not typical. Most fathers and daughters don't talk like this," he moaned. "Oh," Serena said simply. I nodded, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Was he saying he wanted to stop? Before diving into the rest of this story, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more heartfelt stories like this one. If this resonates with you, leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, let's get back to the story. It was the start of summer break, and a strange stillness settled over the house. My dad, David, had just returned from a quick trip to visit his brother, only to leave again shortly after to meet an old friend. My mom was away too, traveling for work. That left me, an 18-year-old college student, alone in the house for the first time in forever. With all this unexpected freedom, I already had a plan. The moment my dad's car disappeared down the street, I locked the front door, swapped my clothes for comfy pajamas, and got ready to relax. Laptop in hand, a cold soda by my side, I sank into the couch and queued up some online entertainment. My headphones helped me tune out the world, giving me the peace I craved. Time flew by as I browsed videos and explored corners of the internet, some of them a bit more mature in nature. Lost in my own little bubble, I completely lost track of time. I thought my dad would be out for hours, but suddenly, through the muffled sound of my headphones, I heard his voice, "Emily." Panic hit me like a brick wall. I hadn't even heard him come in. Uh, he stood frozen in the doorway, his expression a mix of shock and something else I couldn't place. Without saying another word, he turned and walked out, the sound of the door closing behind him cutting through the silence. I sat there, paralyzed with embarrassment, struggling to process what had just happened. Waves of shame washed over me. Eventually, I forced myself to go find him. He was in the kitchen, his face pale, his eyes full of discomfort and pain. "Dad, I'm so sorry," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "I didn't hear you come in." "It won't happen again, I promise." He sighed heavily, avoiding my eyes. "Just please be more careful, Emily," he said softly before walking away. Um, it was during this period that I first broached the subject of Emily. The rest of the evening was unbearably awkward. We barely spoke, retreating to opposite ends of the house. The only sounds were the clinking of dishes and the ticking of the clock. Pluck, pluck, pluck. After dinner, I excused myself early, desperate to escape the tension and hide in my room. But even there, the shame lingered. Um, some moments stick with you, and this one was impossible to shake. Um, that lingering awkwardness from earlier still weighed on me, but I found myself slipping back into my usual routine. I left my bedroom door slightly ajar, hoping to hear when Dad finished cleaning up. I thought I was being subtle, cautious even. What I didn't realize was that my dad, wrestling with his own emotions, had plans of his own. Oh, hands raised upward, hands lowered, as if about to vomit on himself. He turned the kitchen faucet on full blast, using the sound of running water as cover while quietly making his way toward my room. I was lost in my thoughts when his voice startled me from behind. "Emily, it's okay. Don't overthink it, he said softly. I nearly jumped out of my chair, fumbling to close the tabs on my screen. His unexpected presence left me flustered. He stepped into the room, his eyes flicking briefly to my computer screen before settling on mine. Maybe, but I'd like to say probably not. I wanted to apologize for earlier, he began, his voice hesitant. I shouldn't have yelled. I overreacted. I blinked, unsure of how to respond. He raised a hand to stop me. No, listen, he said, his tone measured but strained. At your age, it's normal to be curious. You're young, and I get it. I'm embarrassed, but I want to be honest about how I feel. I nodded, trying to take in his words. I just didn't think you'd be home so soon, I admitted. It won't happen again. I promise. He looked at me for a moment as if trying to make sense of something. How often does this happen? He asked, his tone more curious than judgmental. I froze, unsure how to respond. Finally, I muttered, a lot, I guess? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Emily, you're not doing anything wrong, he said gently. But I can't give you privacy every single day because of this. You'll need to figure out how to manage things when we're both here. The conversation left me stunned. I couldn't wrap my head around this new dynamic, this surreal attempt at understanding something so personal. I think it really did open my perspective to almost any sort of. A few days later, during dinner, he caught me off guard again. So, he asked casually, have you taken care of yourself today? I nearly choked on my food. Dad? Seriously? He raised his hands defensively. Hey, we said we'd be honest about this. No judgment. I guess, I muttered, staring at my plate, silently begging for the conversation to end. After dinner, I escaped to my room, hoping to leave the discomfort behind. But a few minutes later, he appeared in my doorway again, his usual casual demeanor clashing with the tension in the air. Emily, we need to stop treating this like it's some forbidden thing, he said firmly. Let's just talk about it openly. Emily proudly worked to make change in a culture that had centuries of woes and hierarchies that still believed that men. Dad, I interrupted, my voice tight. Please, hear me out. Avoiding it is the only thing making it awkward.
Yeah.
He sighed, sitting down. His intentions were good, but the situation only grew more surreal. That evening turned into a strange, unexpected attempt at finding normalcy within a deeply uncomfortable conversation. The reason was that there was no rest. But it turned into a sorry revelation, actually. The next morning, I woke up wondering if it had all been a bizarre dream. Had my father really tried to tackle something so personal in such an unconventional way? The tension still lingered as I sat at my computer later, trying to make sense of everything. When I heard his footsteps returning from a grocery run, I instinctively closed my tabs and pretended to be busy. He peeked into my room, smiling faintly. Aaron's hand slid from the pillow and reached for his phone. When he pulled it out, he laughed. Hey, lunch will be ready soon, he said casually, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Okay, I replied, unsure how to act. I'll be there in a minute. Lunch was quiet and uneventful. But the awkwardness still hung in the air. To break the silence, I asked, have you heard from Mom? Any idea when she's coming home? Said George, shrugging. A shadow crossed his face. Her trip's been extended, he said, his voice tinged with frustration. I miss her. That single sentence cracked his usually composed demeanor, and I suddenly realized just how much he was holding back. Despite the lingering tension between us, there was a shared understanding that something had shifted. The afternoon passed in relative normalcy, and we even managed to share a few laughs and lighthearted moments. By evening, we decided to sit down together and watch a couple of episodes of Game of Thrones. It felt like a small step toward reclaiming some normalcy in our routine. Later that night, as the house grew quiet, I wandered into the living room. The TV seemed inviting, so I decided to unwind with a movie. Scrolling through the options, I picked something familiar and comforting. While the flickering screen provided a distraction, the events of the day lingered in my mind. The living room, once a space of shared family moments, now felt layered with unspoken complexities. Just as I was settling in, my dad appeared from his room. It was almost uncanny, like he had a sixth sense for these things. Um, Decided to watch out here tonight? Yes, I said, design forming in my mind. It was the first day of spring, and the garden was filled with blossoms and fruits and butterflies. There was even a breeze running through the low, cloudy window. I shrugged. Yeah, just wanted a change of scenery. Next time, call me, he said casually. I like watching stuff with you. Always, I asked, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled. Well, when I'm home, yeah, it's more fun together. Unsure how to respond, I focused on the screen. After a moment of silence, he glanced at the actress on the screen. Her face was cut. Do you like her? He asked. Oh, hmm. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, she's great. She was in that movie we watched yesterday. Can you believe she's 47? He said, shaking his head. She looks amazing, 10 years younger than me. 27. She does look great, I agreed. Is that a hint? He teased. Should I hit the gym too? Um, I couldn't help but grin. Um, Maybe just a little. The light banter was refreshing, a welcome change from the strangeness of the past few days. Suddenly, he stood up. Where are you going? I called after him. Hang on, he said, disappearing down the hallway. I've got something for you. I've got something for you. Totally forgot about it. A moment later, he returned, his hands behind his back and a playful smile on his face. Guess which hand? He teased. Right, I said, playing along. He revealed a small package wrapped in a plain black bag. My curiosity piqued as I began to open it. What's this? I asked. I thought you might find it useful, he said, his grin slightly sheepish. I don't know, I've never used them myself. Um, Inside the bag was a pair of sleek, high-quality headphones. Wow, Dad, these are amazing, I said, genuinely touched. I Go ahead, try them on, he encouraged. Slipped them over my ears and tested the sound quality. They were fantastic. Crystal clear and immersive. Adjusting the fit, I felt a mix of emotions. A part of me had expected something more extravagant, but the thoughtfulness of the gift stood out. It was practical yet personal, acknowledging our shared moments without crossing any boundaries. I slipped them over my ears and tested the sound to see if they stirred. I'm not a very creative person, but I played around with some lighting. And without crying, he stretched and stood up. That's enough for tonight. Time to get some rest. I'll tidy up here. Good night. Good night, Dad, I said, heading to my room. Good night, Emily, he called after me. Later, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind raced with thoughts. It was hard to believe how quickly our relationship had shifted over the past few days. The awkwardness had softened into something else. A strange but comforting understanding. I wondered what the coming days would bring. There was a nervous excitement in the air, an unspoken question about where this new dynamic might lead. Whatever it was, I knew things wouldn't be the same. Here's a refined version with improved flow and focus while preserving the depth of the story. I couldn't deny it. Our bond had changed, becoming something deeper and more complex than I ever expected. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of anticipation and uncertainty. The events of the past few days had undeniably shifted my relationship with Dad, leaving me unsure of how to approach this new dynamic. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of anticipation and uncertainty. The events of the past few days had undeniably shifted my relationship with Dad, leaving me unsure of how to approach this new dynamic. As I made my way to the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee greeted me. Dad was already there, flipping pancakes at the stove. He turned with a warm smile, acting as though everything was perfectly normal. "Good morning, Emily. Sleep well?" "Yeah, thanks," I mumbled, still feeling a hint of awkwardness lingering between us. I gestured toward the headphones sitting on the counter. "By the way, these are great. Thanks again." He nodded, visibly pleased. "Glad you like them. Figured they might come in handy." Breakfast passed mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet. The tension of the previous days seemed to have started dissolving. As I finished my coffee, Dad cleared his throat, breaking the stillness. Hmm. "Emily, I've been thinking," he began. "Maybe we should set a few ground rules about how we handle things moving forward." My face warmed, but I nodded. "Okay, that's fair." He leaned back in his chair, his tone thoughtful but firm. "First, let's keep this between us. Your mom doesn't need to know about any of this." "Agreed," I replied, relieved he felt the same way. "Hmm, hmm," she replied. "Second," he continued, "if you're going to use the living room to unwind, just give me a heads up. I'd rather not walk in and surprise you again." I replied, "No, so sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. I bought you a drink." "That's fair," I said, grateful for his practical approach to what had been a deeply awkward situation. He hesitated for a moment, his voice softening. "And lastly, if you ever want to talk about anything, anything at all, I'm here, okay? You don't have to feel awkward or embarrassed." Um, I looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "Thanks, Dad. I appreciate that." The air between us felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. While I didn't fully understand the shift in our relationship, it was clear we were both trying to find a way forward. Hmm. That made me think of one word that comes to mind, but I think I would rather not share it with you. "I'm here for you, no judgment," he added, his voice carrying a reassuring weight. I nodded, feeling a wave of appreciation. Despite the lingering awkwardness, his effort to be supportive and understanding didn't go unnoticed. Over the next few days, we settled into a new rhythm. I continued my usual activities, but with a newfound sense of comfort, knowing I didn't have to hide or feel ashamed. True to his word, Dad gave me the space I needed, never making me feel embarrassed about my choices. One evening, about a week later, I was in the living room watching a nature documentary on the big screen, a favorite way to unwind. The mix of stunning visuals and engaging narration always felt like the perfect escape. I had let Dad know I'd be using the TV, so I wasn't expecting any interruptions. Um, to my surprise, he joined me on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. "Mind if I watch with you?" he asked casually, nodding toward the screen. "Sure, if you want," I replied, trying to appear nonchalant despite feeling a little self-conscious about sharing my private downtime. Uh, we sat in companionable silence for a while, the soothing voice of the narrator filling the room as breathtaking shots of the Serengeti unfolded on the screen. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Dad's reactions, an occasional nod of interest, a quiet chuckle at clever narration, and the rhythmic sipping of his wine. It had been years since Dad had even sipped wine. That's incredible, he commented at one point, motioning toward the screen where a lioness prowled across the savannah. Look at her, so strong and graceful. I smiled, sensing his genuine interest. Yeah, she's amazing. It's incredible how they work together when hunting. Um, he nodded thoughtfully. What do you think draws you to this? The beauty? The danger? I paused, caught off guard by the question. I guess it's a little of both, I admitted. There's something captivating about how raw and real it all feels. No filters, no pretenses, just life happening in its purest form. That's a good way to put it, he said, taking another sip of wine. It's a good reminder, too. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in our own heads that we forget to just experience things as they are. For the first time in days, I felt like we were truly connecting, sharing thoughts and perspectives without judgment or discomfort. As the documentary continued, I found myself relaxing more, grateful for this unexpected moment of bonding. What is going on? So, me, whatever challenges the past week had brought, it felt like we were finally starting to find our way forward together. I glanced at him, surprised by his candor. You still look great, Dad, I said, feeling a bit awkward, complimenting him in this context. He smiled, clearly pleased. Thanks, Emily. That's sweet of you to say. As the video continued to play, I found myself increasingly distracted, not by the content on the screen, but by the strange sense of openness we were sharing. The new dynamic between us was both unsettling and oddly freeing, though I wasn't entirely sure how to navigate it. Sensing my unease, Dad leaned back and said, Hey, remember, no pressure. If there's ever anything you want to talk about, I'm here. His tone was reassuring, but the moment felt surreal. Surreal was, Thanks, Dad, I muttered, glancing at him. He nodded. Look, everyone has their own way of finding confidence and relaxing. The important thing is not to let it make you feel ashamed or self-conscious. I shifted uncomfortably on the couch, trying to process his words. This whole experience, this new understanding between us, was unlike anything I had ever expected. But at the same time, it wasn't as uncomfortable as I had feared. And so, in this wonderful excitement that fell, as we sat there, Dad offered a few pieces of advice, not in a patronizing way, but with genuine care. His voice was calm, his manner encouraging. You don't have to rush anything in life, he said. Sometimes slowing down and understanding what makes you happy is the best thing you can do for yourself. I nodded, letting his words sink in. While the situation still felt unconventional, there was no denying his intentions came from a place of care. The evening ended on a surprisingly light note, with Dad cracking a few jokes about his own awkward teenage years. We laughed together, easing the tension that had lingered over the past few days. As I headed to bed that night, I realized our relationship had shifted into a new realm of honesty, one that, while unconventional, seemed rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Over the next few weeks, this unconventional dynamic continued to evolve. Dad became more involved in my daily life, offering advice, and at times sitting down to discuss things I had previously kept private. His supportive presence, though unusual, brought a strange sense of comfort. One afternoon, as we relaxed on the couch, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Emily, I think we need to talk about something important," he said, his voice calm but firm. Um, my heart raced, second guessing everything. "What is it?" Dad took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I just want to make sure we're clear about what this all means. It's not typical. Most fathers and daughters don't have conversations or interactions like this." I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I know. Are you saying you want to stop?" To my surprise, he shook his head. "No, that's not it. I just want to make sure you understand that while this might feel unusual, it doesn't change who we are to each other. I'm still your father, and I love you as my daughter. This is just my way of supporting you through a confusing time in your life." His words, though reassuring, left me feeling conflicted. "I understand, Dad. I love you too, and I really appreciate your support. But why are you okay with this? Most parents wouldn't be." He paused, considering his response carefully. "I suppose it's because I trust you, Emily," he said finally. "And I know you're navigating things in your own way. I just want to be someone you can rely on, um, someone who doesn't judge or make things harder for you." His answer left me with a strange sense of gratitude and clarity. Whatever challenges this new chapter brought, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't facing them alone. Mm, mm. His answer left me with a strange sense of gratitude and clarity. Whatever challenges this new chapter brought, I wasn't facing them alone. Essay, have you ever read that? It's because I remember how confusing and overwhelming these feelings can be at your age, Dad added, his voice steady and reflective. "When I was your age, I didn't have anyone to guide me, and I made plenty of poor choices because of it. I want something better for you, Emily. I want you to feel comfortable with who you are and to understand yourself without shame or secrecy." His honesty struck a chord. I looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot to me." He smiled warmly and pulled me into a brief, supportive hug. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Now, how about we watch something a little lighter tonight? I heard there's a new nature documentary on Netflix." Hmm. Funny. Relieved by the shift in tone, I nodded. "That sounds perfect." And nodded eagerly. "That sounds perfect." As we settled onto the couch and started the documentary, I couldn't help but feel a deep appreciation for my father. Despite the unconventional nature of our recent conversations, his motivations were clear. They stemmed from a place of genuine care and a desire to support me in a way he had never experienced himself. The weeks passed quickly, and before I knew it, it was nearly time for Mom to return from her business trip. Dad and I both understood that the unique openness we had shared would likely need to change once she was back. The night before her return, Dad knocked on my bedroom door. "Emily, can we talk for a minute?" I set aside the book I'd been reading. "Sure, Dad. What's up?" He sat on the edge of my bed, his expression serious but kind. "Mom comes home tomorrow, and things will probably go back to normal. I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're feeling about everything." I paused, considering his question carefully. The past few weeks had been transformative in many ways. Challenging, yes, but also strangely liberating. Um, I'm okay, Dad, I said softly. I mean, I'll miss how open we've been with each other, but I understand that things need to shift with Mom coming back. Um, he nodded, a look of relief crossing his face. I'm glad you understand, Emily. I want you to know how proud I am of you. Over the past few weeks, I've seen you grow and mature so much. I um I hope that our talks and everything we've shared have helped you in some way. They have, Dad, I assured him, my voice steady. More than you probably realize. Thank you for being there for me. His expression softened as he leaned in and kissed my forehead, something he hadn't done in years. Oh, you're welcome, sweetheart. And remember, even though this part of our relationship might change, I'm always here for you, no matter what. As he stood to leave, I called out, Dad? He turned back. Yeah, Emily? Of you, I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. She looked at me. A warm smile spread across his face. I love you too, honey. Always. The next day, Mom returned, and the dynamics of our household shifted back to what they had been before. Yet, something between Dad and me had undeniably changed. We now shared an unspoken bond, a connection built on trust, openness, and understanding that went beyond a typical father-daughter relationship. In the years that followed, I often reflected on that summer. Um, while some might view it as unconventional, for me, it was a time of immense growth and self-discovery. Um, Dad's unorthodox approach had provided me with confidence and self-awareness that many of my peers seemed to lack. Um, as I navigated relationships, independence, and my own identity in college and beyond, I carried with me the lessons he had taught me. His openness, patience, and unconditional support shaped me in ways I was only beginning to fully appreciate. Though we never spoke directly about that summer again, it remained a quiet chapter in our shared history, a moment that brought us closer while teaching invaluable lessons about love, trust, and self acceptance. Looking back, I realized that what might have seemed unusual to others was for us a profound expression of a father's love and a daughter's trust. It was a summer that changed everything, yet, in its own way, changed nothing at all.